Hey guys, tonight we descend into a world not quite ruled by kings or clerics, but by kazoo players, jugglers, and a man who insists on calling his goat Sir Reginald. Yes, we're heading into the chaotic symphony of historical street performers, those unsung heroes of accidental public entertainment and deeply involuntary audience participation. And guess what? You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to drums again, not the war kind, though honestly that would be quieter. These are drums of the soul, according to the man currently seated 2 feet from your bedroom window, tapping away with the fervor of someone who's never heard the word volume. He's wearing 3 scarves, none of them around his neck, and his sandals are made of what you can only assume is old boat leather. Welcome to your morning routine. You live above a bakery. Sounds charming until you realize that this means every street performer in a 3 block radius has claimed your cobbled square as acoustically perfect. By sunrise, you've already had a man play spoons against a wine jug, a 6-year-old whistling through his thumbs, and a woman who, while technically singing, appears to be summoning a weather spirit. You roll off your straw mattress with the grace of a man who has slept through 3 pipe solos and at least one didgeridoo. There's flour in your hair. The air smells like old bread, brass polish, and sweaty ambition. You try to open the window and are immediately greeted by a flurry of feathers. Someone's juggling chickens again, for the 3rd time this week. Historical fact: in medieval towns, street performers were often the main source of public entertainment. With no Netflix, no TikTok, and no concept of noise ordinances, your only option was to either join them or slowly lose your grip on reality. The town square was their theater. The public was their captive audience. And your peace of mind? Non-refundable. You wrap yourself in a wool tunic that smells suspiciously like burnt onions and try to make your way downstairs. You've barely made it 2 steps when you hear it. The distinct soul-rattling thunk of a poorly tuned drum being enthusiastically attacked. Again, you step outside bleary-eyed and are immediately mistaken for a willing participant. Would you like to cleanse your chakras with music of the old world? A man asks you, already shaking something that looks like a maraca made of goat teeth. You decline politely. He does not stop. You duck past a man balancing on stilts made from reclaimed fence posts. He nods at you solemnly, nearly decapitates himself on a laundry line, and mutters something about performance taxes. You're not sure if that's real. You're not sure anything is real anymore. Now, here's a fringe historical tidbit for you. Some street performers in early Rome were considered protected by the gods, especially those who used satire or puppetry, which is great, except you're currently being shadowed by a guy who believes he's channeling Apollo through interpretive coughing. He's wearing half a tunic and a crown made of melon rinds. You don't ask questions. As you attempt to cross the square to buy bread, which, if we're honest, is already a luxury given how frequently the vendors are interrupted by breakdancing troubadours, you realize you've stepped into a semicircle. A crowd is forming. At the center, a man, shirtless, painted head to toe in silver. He's standing still, which seems fine, until he suddenly screams, "Behold!" and starts mimicking childbirth in slow motion. You try to step back, but someone's goat is in the way, possibly Sir Reginald. You resign yourself to watching. The performance includes dramatic moaning, interpretive rolling, and a brief but haunting kazoo solo. At the climax, a child throws him a radish, which he catches in his teeth and eats with disturbing sensuality. Historians still argue whether street performers like this were genuinely respected or merely tolerated out of social exhaustion. There are records of jesters being paid in beer and roast chicken, and others being run out of town for excessive symbol usage. You believe both equally. You finally edge your way out of the circle, only to be grabbed gently, but firmly, by a woman holding a tambourine and wearing 57 bells. She locks eyes with you. Would you like to feel your inner horse? You would not. But it's too late. She starts galloping in place, the bells a deafening waterfall of noise. People cheer. You consider running, but someone shoves a carrot in your hand. You're not sure if this is symbolic or a snack. You spot an alley and make a break for it. Safe at last? Not quite. The alley contains a man with a harmonica, 3 pigeons, and what appears to be a half-built trebuchet. You don't ask. You just back away slowly, whispering apologies to the pigeons. The sound of tambourines fades. The jugglers move on. The man on stilts finally falls. You return home with no bread, a throbbing ear, and deep spiritual confusion. But hey, you survived another morning. Barely. You step outside again after what you hoped would be a quiet moment to collect yourself. Foolish. Rookie mistake. Because just as your brain begins to unclench, you hear the telltale clink, clink, clink of metal meeting air, and your body knows before your eyes do. There are jugglers, and they're dangerously confident. 3 of them, standing in a line, performing what they proudly call the flaming spiral of divine coordination. You? You call it the reason you no longer trust the sky. One has knives, the other has torches. The third, for reasons no one fully understands, is juggling raw fish. The knives glint, the flames roar, and the fish, well, they're flopping, which feels inappropriate for a performance that's drawing applause. You try to sneak past, blending in like a background extra in your own life, but it's no use. The man with the torches shouts, "You there," with the cautious energy of someone who's been betrayed by street magic before. That's you. Before you can object, you're gently, but firmly, pulled into their performance space. A semicircle of onlookers erupts in approval, most of them holding skewered meat and poor decision-making skills. One juggler hands you a cloth, soaked in something that smells suspiciously like old wine and regret. Wave this majestically when I shout Ignis Triumphum. You nod because you're polite. You do not know what that means, but you have a feeling it's going to involve fire, your personal space, and maybe some light trauma. Here's your historical fact. Juggling, or versions of it, has existed since ancient Egypt. Murals in Beni Hassan show female jugglers tossing balls in rhythmic patterns. It was often a symbol of balance and harmony, though harmony was clearly on holiday during this particular performance. Meanwhile, in ancient China, jugglers entertained royal courts with acrobatic knife displays and, bizarrely, live geese. Today, you're the royal court, and the goose? Probably backstage. The man with the knives spins 3 blades in the air. One grazes your tunic. Not enough to wound, but just enough to fray your remaining will to live. You raise the cloth with what you hope is majestic enthusiasm. The crowd gasps, A child nearby shouts, "Do the spinny thing." The juggler obliges. 3 knives, 2 torches, 1 fish. They all fly. One torch bounces once, ping, off a cobblestone. You duck instinctively. The fish hits you squarely in the shoulder. Damp, icy, existential. Historians still argue whether medieval performers carried licenses or were simply tolerated until someone got stabbed. The voice in your head narrates helpfully as you slowly back away, trailing fish juice. It's unclear whether the jugglers notice. They're bowing, the crowd is clapping, and someone tosses a boiled egg in appreciation. You run. Well, you shuffle. Dignity is hard to sprint with. Back around the corner, you duck into a shop, hoping to blend in among dusty jars and suspiciously sticky scrolls. The shopkeeper, a man with 3 teeth and an open bottle of mead, offers you aromatic balm. You ask what it's for. He shrugs. Life, mostly. You decline, but thank him politely. Because you're trying to be a better person. You still smell like flaming fish, but you're alive. And in this town, that's a small miracle. As you step back outside, you notice one of the jugglers jogging toward the river yelling, "I need to borrow your goat," at no one in particular. The goat does not seem on board. You reflect for a moment. You could have been anywhere. A quiet village with no street shows. A monastery full of silence and lentils. But no, you are here. In a city that believes juggling fire over strangers is a wholesome pre-lunch activity. Fringe tidbit time. In some Renaissance cities, jugglers were required to announce their act in advance by clanging bells or blowing a horn, supposedly for safety, though most accounts suggest it just gave people time to brace themselves or hide their valuables. You did not get a warning. You got a fish to the clavicle. The square is quieter now. A man sweeping up burnt torch residue hums softly, and a child pokes at the fish with the kind of scientific curiosity that leads to tetanus. You consider heading home again, but something inside you whispers, "Bread. You still need bread." So you try again. The baker's stand is now semi-accessible, assuming you can navigate past a man teaching a goose to curtsy. You nod respectfully. The goose stares back. You're unsure who blinked first. You reach the stand. Finally, bread is within reach. But just as your fingers graze the edge of a warm barley loaf, a shadow falls across the basket. You look up. A juggler. The same one. He smiles. "We're rehearsing our next act. Want to be the drum?" You do not. You take your bread, tuck it under your tunic, and exit the plaza with the elegance of a fleeing raccoon. As you walk home, your shoulder drying slowly from fish juice and your dignity fluttering like a bruised flag, you can't help but marvel at the sheer tenacity of it all. These performers, these ragtag chaos artists, they survive on the thin edge between applause and arrest. And somehow, so do you. You unlock your door. You sit on your bed. You bite the bread. There's sand in it. Naturally, you're sitting on your bed, chewing sand bread, with the resigned crunch of someone who knows this is just breakfast now. Your shoulder still smells faintly of trout flambe. And yet, you persist, because this is life. And in this particular corner of history, you don't get silence, you get a symphony of chaos. You wipe your hands on your tunic, stand up, and peer out the window again. Big mistake. The troupe is back. This time they're dancing, but not like pleasant folk jig dancing. Oh no, this is aggressive, interpretive, emotionally complicated dancing. It involves stomping, leaping, and a lot of direct eye contact. the kind of dancing that makes you question both your soul and your property values. They formed a line across the main thoroughfare, meaning anyone trying to get to the market, temple, or even just around the corner to cry in peace must now first navigate the corridor of expressive movement. You steel yourself, you head outside. Immediately, you're caught in the periphery of a pirouette that nearly knocks your hat off. The dancer, a man in what appears to be a bedsheet tied with string, gasps theatrically, grabs your hands, and begins to spin. You are now dancing. This is not consensual. Let your inner bird be free, he shouts, which you suppose explains the flapping. The bells on his ankles sound like tiny cowbells being punished for a crime. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Medieval towns did, in fact, host dancing troupes who performed in the streets for both entertainment and spiritual reasons. In some cases, like the infamous dancing plague of 1518, people danced uncontrollably for days. Historians still argue whether it was mass hysteria, ergot poisoning, or simply the first documented rave. You're hoping this is just part of a schedule and not a biological inevitability. You try to escape mid-cha-cha, but your foot catches on a tambourine someone has flung like a frisbee. You stumble. The audience applauds. You did not agree to be an artist. A woman nearby tosses flower petals in your general direction. You assume it's symbolic or sarcastic. You finally break free, only to find that the dancing has expanded. It's not a performance anymore. It's a migration. The troupe moves as one, weaving through the town square like a colorful tornado of motion and vague drum beats. People join. People leave. One man appears to have fallen asleep mid-twirl, but is still being dragged gently by the current of elbows and joy. You duck into an alcove. You breathe. You reorient. A child hands you a daisy chain and says, "For bravery." You nod solemnly. This is your war medal now. Fringe tidbit. Some troops use dance to beg for alms during festivals. They would train year-round to prepare a performance meant to earn just enough coin to survive the winter. That's a lot of jazz hands for a stale biscuit. You watch from your corner as one dancer climbs a fruit cart and begins a solo that involves slapping his thighs, whistling, and weeping. You feel a sudden, inexplicable emotional response. It could be awe, it could be indigestion, and then suddenly silence. Not true silence, but a shift. The music stops. The dancers freeze. You think maybe it's over, but no, they all turn, in unison, toward you. The lead dancer points. He has the rhythm. You do not have the rhythm. You barely have your footing. You shall bless us with the final gesture of the spirit legs. You really, really don't want to know what that is. You back away. You stumble again. Your sandal catches on a cobblestone shaped like despair. But you don't fall. Not fully. Just enough to twist awkwardly and somehow flail your arms in a manner that, apparently, is sacred. They cheer. The troupe erupts. Someone throws confetti or possibly shredded cabbage. A small drum is hoisted. A goat bleats approvingly. You are their chosen one now, for reasons that will likely never be explained. Historians still argue whether this kind of spontaneous canonization was real or just a byproduct of too much mead and not enough personal space. Either way, you now have a fan club. Sort of. They chant something. It might be your name. It might be a soup recipe. You wave. You curtsy. You exit, pursued by two flute players and a man with cymbals strapped to his knees. You sprint. You hide behind a market stall. The vendor, a woman selling decorative rocks and aggressively spicy olives, stares at you like you just emerged from a rain barrel, which, to be fair, is not far from the truth emotionally. You buy an olive. It is hotter than sin. Your tears now serve multiple causes. You look back at the plaza. The dancers have moved on. A different act begins. A man playing two recorders with his nose. You decide it's time to go home. But as you walk away, still chewing on the world's angriest olive and wondering what kind of ancient curse you've walked into, you catch yourself smiling, just slightly, because there's something weirdly comforting about it all. The energy, the passion, the sheer audacity of these people to perform like their lives depend on it, which in many cases they do. And maybe that's the magic, or maybe it's just heat stroke. Either way, you survived another round of uninvited choreography. Barely. You get home and try briefly to reclaim your dignity. You sit on your stool. You breathe. You check for residual petals in your tunic folds. There are 3. You remove 2. The third has apparently fused with the fabric. You name it Gregory. Just as you consider boiling some water or your entire life for purification, you hear it. A sound that strikes fear into the soul of every person who has ever wanted a quiet lunch. The shrill warble of a wooden flute. You freeze. It's not the jolly whistle of a happy tune, or even the gentle lilt of a tavern ditty. No. This is something darker, more primal. A series of breathy wheezes that sound like a duck being interrogated by a ghost. It echoes through the alleyways like a medieval alarm system set to emotional damage. You step outside because you're a glutton for punishment, and there he is, the flutist. He's not particularly old or young or clean. He's just intense. He plays the flute the way a sleep-deprived squirrel might play a leaf blower, frenzied, erratic, and with deep spiritual conviction. His eyes are closed. His body sways like he's being gently electrocuted. His hair forms a halo of twigs and baked onion slices. You try to walk around. He pivots with you. He is mobile. He is committed. You're not the only one trapped. Several townsfolk are frozen mid-task, held hostage by the sheer awkwardness of trying to ignore someone making extreme eye contact while producing flute sounds that resemble a mating call for gremlins. Historical fact time. The flute is one of the oldest instruments known to man, dating back over 40,000 years. It's been used in ceremonies, military signaling, and occasionally, emotional terrorism. In many ancient cultures, it was revered as a tool to commune with the divine. You are currently communing with the divine spirit of auditory regret. The flutist hits a note so high it seems to offend a passing cat. The cat bolts. You consider following it, but just when you think it can't get any worse, he starts to speak. "O seeker of silent truths," he intones dramatically, pausing his flute mid-wail. "Have you come to dance with the winds of memory? You have not. I saw you earlier," he adds, pointing a flute-covered finger at you. Your soul moved. The rhythm chose you. You're deeply uncomfortable. "I play," he says, lowering his voice, "for the bones of the past." And then he plays again, louder, harder, with the breath control of someone who hasn't blinked since sunrise. You make a move for the alley. He follows, shuffling sideways like a crab, never breaking eye contact. This man has no concept of personal space or personal hygiene. Let's drop in a fringe historical tidbit. In Byzantine marketplaces, musicians were occasionally hired by shopkeepers to draw attention to their stalls. But if they played too long or too loudly, they could be fined or forcibly removed. You begin fantasizing about bringing that rule back with enthusiasm. The flutist finally pauses. He breathes. You speak. "Sir, Would you perhaps like a radish? He takes it solemnly, nods, and announces, barter accepted. He moves on, still playing, now in 3/4 time. You're safe, for now. You lean against a wall, pulse steadying, when another sound approaches. Different, subtle. The clink of metal against teeth. You look up. Another performer. This time, a spoon biter. He's holding two large spoons and is apparently chewing one of them while balancing the other on his forehead. This is not music. This is a demonstration of jaw strength, maybe, or madness. He smiles, revealing suspiciously few teeth, and beckons. You decline. He shrugs and bites harder. A few children applaud. One screams. You can't tell if it's joy or horror. You edge away again, toward the market square. You pass by a window where someone is playing a harp very, very badly. It's a soothing reminder that not all performers are overly ambitious. Some are just extremely mediocre. But then you hear it, not music, not dancing. No, this is worse. A voice, a monologue. You know what's coming next. The street poet. He stands in the center of the square, barefoot, cloaked in a patchwork of old curtains, and holding a scroll that may or may not be blank. His voice is smooth, like butter left out in the sun too long. Time, he says, pointing at a pigeon, is a feather caught in the breath of destiny. The pigeon coos, unimpressed. You try to walk past quietly. He notices you. Ah, a witness to the aching ache of ages. You've been chosen. He circles you slowly, reciting, behold, a traveler of time, cloaked in dust and breadcrumbs, haunted by the scent of flame fish and the whispers of tambourines. He's not wrong, but you resent the accuracy. Mainstream debate alert. Historians still argue whether street poets were viewed as respected voices of the people or just tolerated, because shouting into the void was preferable to actual labor. Either way, you are now the subject of a four-stanza metaphor involving Olive's destiny and something called the damp echo of regret. You nod politely. You walk away, slowly, carefully, like a man tiptoeing past a bear with a lute. You turn the corner. You exhale. And there, blessedly, stands silence. For 10 whole seconds, until someone lights a fire baton and a new crowd starts to cheer. You sit down on a barrel. You accept your fate. You watch a man in a tunic juggle eggs. While reciting the periodic table of herbs, you realize it doesn't matter what the act is. The rule of the street is simple. You are always the audience. You close your eyes. You wonder what peace sounds like. Probably not a flute. You think you found it? Peace, that is. A moment without clangs, chants, interpretive groaning, or the distant rattle of spoons against teeth. You sit on a barrel, hoping it's not the performance kind, the ones that explode into papier mache birds if you shift your weight wrong. The square for once seems calm. Children toss pebbles. An old man feeds crumbs to a pigeon who clearly outranks him in confidence. And then you see him, standing completely still near the well, face painted chalk white, eyebrows removed, voluntarily, hands gloved, lips pursed, eyes locked on yours, like he's about to sell you a cursed heirloom. He is the mime. You try to look away. You try to disengage. But he begins the act. He presses his palms against invisible walls. He pulls an invisible rope. He climbs an invisible ladder. All of this would be fine if he did it somewhere else. But no, he is following you. You stand. He mimics. You walk. He glides after you. You stop. He freezes. one arm mid-wave, mouth forming a silent gasp. A child claps. You do not. You're now the unwilling co-star in a silent, extremely low-budget production of Guy Walking to Buy Onions. The mime shadows you with the seriousness of a man performing for the ghost of his father. Mainstream historical fact. Miming dates back to ancient Greece and Rome, with performers often using pantomime to express scenes from mythology. But in medieval Europe, mimes, or mute jesters, were often seen as tricksters or social commentators. Their silence? A loophole in court laws. You couldn't punish someone for what they didn't say, only for what they silently implied with very elaborate hand movements. Your mime is implying everything. You trip? He flails. You sigh? He crumples to the ground, clutching his chest like your despair just broke his invisible heart. You try bribery. You toss him a coin. He catches it, sniffs it, kisses it, and tucks it somewhere you hope is symbolic. He's not leaving. You stop by a merchant cart and pretend to inspect some onions. The mime leans in, picks up an invisible onion, peels it layer by imaginary layer, and then sobs theatrically, dabbing his face with an invisible handkerchief. People are now watching him, watching you. You are art now. You did not consent. Fringe tidbit. In some 14th century French towns, mimes were believed to possess divine silence, the idea that their wordlessness allowed them to see truths no one else could say, which is poetic until one follows you into the public latrine and silently critiques your posture. You pivot. You bolt across the square, turning sharply around a barrel and vanishing down a side street. Silence. You breathe. Then he reappears, perched atop a haystack. Arms crossed, eyes narrowed. You let out a small scream. He pretends to echo it, silently. With jazz hands, this mime is committed. You double back toward the bakery. You can see it now. Sweet, crusty sanctuary. But before you can cross the street, a trumpet blares. A loud, blaring, squawking trumpet. You jump. The mime recoils. A new player has entered the game. It's a young man in a tunic 3 sizes too large, wielding a brass trumpet like it owes him money. He plays with gusto. He plays with fire. He plays Greensleeves. In a key that may not legally exist, the mime hisses at the intrusion. They begin a turf war. The mime circles silently. The trumpeter blows louder. The mime mimes offense. The trumpeter adds in footwork. The mime mimes vomit. You stand in the middle of this escalating artistic slap fight and think, this is why I can't have normal Wednesdays. Historians still argue whether performers coordinated with each other or simply fought passive-aggressive battles over attention and street space. You are now part of Exhibit A. The trumpeter launches into a dramatic flourish. The mime collapses in exaggerated agony. A woman throws a turnip in support. No one sure for whom. You edge away. You find a bench. You sit. You rest your face in your hands. You think maybe if you stay very still, all performers will lose interest, like T-Rexes or tax collectors. And for a minute it works, until you hear a new sound, a soft shuffling, a murmur, the rustle of fabric. You look up. He's back. Not the mime. Worse, the fire eater. He walks barefoot on cobblestone, which already makes you nervous. His cloak smells like wax and old meat. His beard is singed. His eyes say visionary, but his eyebrows, long gone, say dangerous decisions have occurred. He stops in front of your bench. Flame, he whispers, is the only truth. You try to smile politely. He removes a long stick dipped in something oily. lights it with a flint, tilts his head back, and proceeds to swallow the flame with the kind of ease you reserve for soup. The small crowd applauds. You don't. You're busy scanning for a water bucket. He breathes the fire out in a plume so dramatic it singes a nearby merchant's awning. She shrieks. He bows. He approaches you. Would you like to learn? He asks, voice raspy like burnt parchment. You would not. You shake your head. He nods. Wise? The last apprentice grew eyebrows just to lose them. You take that as your cue to walk away. You are 70% sure your cloak is slightly smoking. You head for the river. You don't know why. Maybe it's the sound of water. Maybe it's because, deep down, you hope there's a quieter town across the bridge, one without interpretive onions or miming threats. As you sit by the water, a goose waddles up and honks disapprovingly. It might be a performer. You're too tired to care. You're still by the river, staring into the rippling water, like it holds the answers to life, silence, and perhaps how to erase the image of a man breathing fire directly above your lunch. A goose pecks at your sandal, reminding you that nature too has performers, and not all of them respect personal space. You get up, back into the fray, and just when you think you've witnessed every form of entertainment your poor senses can endure, there it is, the unicycle, or rather, a unicycle, rolling precariously down the cobbled street like a wheel with a death wish. Perched atop it, a man in a tunic much too short and a hat that appears to have been formerly owned by a fruit stand. He's shouting something unintelligible, possibly a prayer, or maybe just instructions to the unicycle, which looks increasingly unsure about the meaning of its own existence. You stop to observe, because how could you not? There are cobblestones. There is gravity. There are at least 3 chickens in the vicinity. This is about to go spectacularly wrong. He pedals with determination, weaving between baskets of figs and an elderly woman selling garlic necklaces. His arms flail, not in rhythm with the wheel, mind you, but more in defiance of logic. He turns slightly left. The unicycle disagrees. He overcorrects right. The unicycle, full of spite, goes straight. It hits a rut. He lifts into the air for half a second, a glorious silent moment in which time freezes, and the gods themselves lean in, popcorn in hand, and then crash. He lands in a pile of hay, which miraculously absorbs both him and the unicycle like a large, forgiving carbohydrate. One of the chickens, however, is not as lucky. It squawks, launches into the air, and lands 3 stalls over, now part of a juggling act that hadn't signed up-ish for poultry. Historical fact: while the modern unicycle didn't appear until the late 1800s, various performers throughout history experimented with single-wheel contraptions or balance-based stunts. In medieval fairs, acrobats and tumblers often used wooden barrels or rolling beams as props. There are even accounts of wheel-dancing monks in isolated Germanic abbeys. Historians still argue whether this was sacred devotion or just monks getting bored during Lent. The man pops his head out of the hay, triumphant. And that, he declares, hay in his beard, was the leap of trust. You nod. Because honestly, what else do you do when a man performs an accidental somersault into produce? A crowd has gathered. Someone tosses him a coin. Someone else tosses him a cabbage. You're not sure which one he appreciates more. You turn to leave, but your way is blocked by a child with an accordion that's twice her size. She smiles. Then she begins to play. Or rather, she attempts to play. It is not a tune. It is not a rhythm. It is chaos. Compressed air and emotional intensity, a soundtrack for medieval confusion. A goat nearby passes out. A baby starts crying. You somehow develop a headache from sound alone, and yet she is proud. She is 5. She is invincible. As you step around her, careful not to step on the aggressive corner of the accordion, a man crashes into you. He's holding a broom, except he's playing it, like a lute, badly. He strums once, smiles, and begins to sing a ballad about heartbreak, porridge, and taxes. You don't catch all the words, but the phrase, my soul was audited, really sticks. Fringe tidbit, improvised instruments were a staple of lower class performers throughout history. From washboards to animal horns, even fish bones, if it made noise, someone in history turned it into art, probably loudly, probably next to someone just trying to eat. The broom lute bard follows you for half a block, serenading your back with increasingly creative rhymes about loneliness and lentils. You pretend to tie your sandal. He waits. You pretend to lose a coin. He offers help. You finally duck into a stall selling fermented carrots just to escape. You stay there for a while. The vendor, an elderly woman with 3 teeth and a gaze like boiled vinegar, offers you a sample. It smells like decisions you can't take back. You thank her anyway. When you finally emerge, the street has changed again. Now there's a procession. Men on stilts, women balancing plates, one person wearing nothing but a barrel and intense eyeshadow. You try to cross, but get herded into the line. You are now in a parade, unwillingly. A child hands you a tambourine. You accept your fate. You shake it once. People cheer. A new identity is forming. Performer by proximity. Artist by accident. You make it to the edge of the square and collapse onto a bench that someone carved "Don't sit here" into. You sit anyway, because rebellion is all you have left. A woman approaches. She's holding a stack of onions and a flute. You consider running, but she just smiles, says, "Good tambourining," and walks on. Historians still debate whether medieval street performers had unions, codes of conduct, or just silently agreed not to set each other on fire. So far, your experience leans heavily toward chaos-based diplomacy. You rest. You've survived the unicyclist, the broom troubadour, the accordionist in training, and a spontaneous parade. Your ears ring, your knees ache, but you are strangely proud. You check your tunic pocket and find a single coin someone must have given you. You have been tipped. You are now a street performer. Congratulations! You wake up the next morning to the sound of hooves. That wouldn't be unusual, except these hooves are paired with fire. Not metaphorical fire, actual flames. You crack open your door, and there, standing 3 feet from your steps, is a man in nothing but red leggings and a leather vest, juggling fire sticks, while a donkey in theatrical eyeliner paces in circles behind him. It's too early for this. He spots you. Good morrow, friend. Care to join my breakfast performance? You absolutely do not, but he's already begun his act. He throws a fire stick into the air with reckless joy. The donkey pauses mid-step. The flame arcs beautifully and lands in your neighbor's water bucket. Hiss. Steam. Applause. You step back inside. Fire eaters. During breakfast. This is your life now. Historical fact. Street fire eaters were not just performers, but often viewed as mystics or spiritual showmen. Some claimed to have fire immunity from divine intervention. Others just had very high pain tolerance and access to cool water. In festivals and open-air markets, fire tricks were often the final act, drawing crowds, coins, and occasionally lawsuits. You peek through your window. The donkey has now joined the act, balancing a tray of onions on its back. The man blows a huge plume of flame into the morning air, singes part of your thatch roof, and bows as if he's just discovered oxygen. Fringe tidbit: in 12th century Italy, it was illegal to perform with a live flame within city walls after sunset, but in villages too small to enforce such rules or too amused to care, fire tricks remained a breakfast staple for the daring and unwise. You decide to escape, somewhere with less combustion. You throw on a tunic, slightly singed at the hem, and head toward the eastern market. It's quieter there, or so you're told. You turn a corner and immediately dodge a unicycle, the same one as yesterday, now ridden by a different man. This one is blindfolded. You sprint. You arrive breathless to the market square and pause. No jugglers, no dancers, no flames, just people selling baskets of leeks and whispering about someone's cousin who accidentally married a goat. You almost relax. Then it begins. The low clanging of pans, rhythmic, intentional. You know this sound. You feared this sound. Tambourine toddlers. A wave of small children emerges from behind a stall, all shaking objects that vaguely resemble instruments. One has a stringless lute, another is playing a hollowed gourd, and the ringleader? A 5-year-old with a tambourine the size of a wagon wheel. They're dressed in miniature tunics, half of them backward, with scarves tied around their heads like battle-ready gnomes. Their rhythm is not so much off as it is invented entirely on the spot by sugar and rebellion. They march through the market with the chaotic energy of a goose chase in a thunderstorm. A carrot cart overturns. A dog joins in. A woman faints, possibly from the noise, possibly from drama. You attempt to step out of the way. You fail. The leader spots you. He locks eyes. He raises the tambourine above his head and shakes it once. The group stops. They surround you. Play, he says. You consider fleeing into the sea, but instead, you take a small wooden spoon from a vendor's table, tap it awkwardly on a gourd, and hope that counts. The children cheer. You've been accepted into the band. You are now a tambourine toddler. You didn't sign up for this. Historical debate alert. Scholars still argue about the role of children in medieval performance culture. Some sources suggest they were trained as jesters or dancers from a young age, often as family trades. Others claim their performances were spontaneous, unregulated chaos. Based on current evidence, your life, the latter feels more accurate. The performance reaches its climax when one child leaps into a barrel and emerges triumphantly with 2 moldy apples. The crowd erupts. Coins are tossed. You get hit in the knee with a potato. You bow. You don't know why. The children scatter. You are alone again, except not quite. Because just as you dust yourself off and attempt to reclaim your adult dignity, a puppet emerges. Not a puppet being carried, a puppet walking. You freeze. From behind a barrel, a hunched figure appears, holding a wooden marionette shaped like a small wizard. It walks with delicate steps, nodding politely to passers-by. Its eyes are painted, but somehow alive. It bows to you. You bow back. You don't know why. Then it speaks. Well, he speaks. The puppeteer. In a voice 10 times too loud for comfort, he booms. Greetings, traveler. I am Mordo, keeper of the buttons. You flinch. The puppet turns to face you. The voice now shrinks to a whisper. Have you chosen your path today? You are deeply unsettled. Puppet shows have been around for millennia, used for satire, morality tales, and apparently philosophical crises. In medieval towns, they were often educational tools, though what you're learning is mostly how to fight the urge to scream at wood. Fringe tidbit: in some medieval puppet traditions, like Sicilian marionette theater, opera dei pupi, the puppets would reenact epic battles, and their popularity sometimes rivaled that of live actors. Some viewers preferred the predictability of wooden heroes over live ones who occasionally fainted mid monologue. Mordo, the puppet continues: beware the path of cabbage, for it ends in fungus. You nod. You walk away. You hear the faint clack of wooden feet behind you. You don't turn around. You make it back to your street, exhausted, smelling faintly of ash, pickles, and child percussion. The fire juggler is gone, replaced by a woman selling radish poetry. You lock your door. You sit on your bed. Your walls are still vibrating slightly from the tambourine march, and outside, just faintly, Mordo calls into the wind. Know your buttons, friend. You whisper, I don't even wear buttons. But you believe him anyway. You've begun to question whether quiet ever really existed, not just in your town, but in the entire concept of history. You suspect that even ancient cave dwellers had at least one guy banging rocks together at 3 a.m. and shouting interpretive thunder. Still, you try again. Today, maybe, you'll reach the apothecary without being recruited into a reenactment of a battle that never happened. You open the door slowly, like someone checking for wolves. No jugglers, no puppets, no children with improvised percussion, just birds chirping and someone yelling about fermented cabbage in the distance. You exhale. Good enough. You round the corner and immediately stop, because somehow someone has built a ramp on the street, using barrels, bread crates, and what appears to be a door stolen from the tax collector's office. You stare at it. It stares back. You already know what this is. It's the acrobats. There are two of them. Brothers, probably. Identical tunics, identical grins, identical disregard for gravity. One is stretching dramatically, the other is tying a ribbon around his forehead like he's about to battle dragons. You pause, hoping to pass unseen. Too late. You! The taller one shouts. Behold, a volunteer! You shake your head. He continues louder. Behold, a brave and daring volunteer. The crowd, who were previously just buying celery, now turns to watch. You're handed a stick. Why? No one explains. You're positioned awkwardly at the end of the ramp. One acrobat climbs the nearby roof. The other begins clapping slowly. The crowd joins in. This is happening. You hold the stick up like a sad referee. The acrobat jumps. It's majestic, terrifying. You hear wind whistling past your ear. He flips midair, lands on the stick, kind of, wobbles, and falls into a barrel of grain with a sound best described as regretful whoomph. Everyone cheers. He emerges spitting wheat. You are thanked. You are offered a slightly damp celery stalk as a token of appreciation. You accept it. You have no choice. Mainstream historical fact. Acrobatic performances were a common sight in town festivals, religious fairs, and public squares across the ancient and medieval world. In China's Han Dynasty, they formed entire entertainment courts. In medieval Europe, acrobats often traveled in troops, performing human pyramids, tightrope walks, and stunts involving furniture that should never leave a dining room. You eat the celery. It's bitter, like your life choices. As you head toward the apothecary, you pass a pair of dancers arguing over whether feathers or bells create more emotional clarity. You do not engage. You're on a mission now. Herbal salve, maybe something to cleanse your aura of mime trauma. But then it begins again. Drums. You flinch. But not the chaos drums. not the ones played by barefoot teens with ideas about destiny and questionable hygiene. No, these are slow, rhythmic, measured. A procession is forming. You step back, curious despite yourself. At the front, an elderly man in a robe covered in herbs, twigs, and possibly very aggressive moss. Behind him, a cluster of performers with solemn faces, carrying a goat on a platform. The goat is wearing a crown and a smirk. You whisper to a bystander, "What is this?" "The ritual of Sir Capricious." She replies reverently, "You consider asking for details. But remember what happened last time you asked questions." You simply nod and join the cluster of people who are pretending they know what's going on. The drummers stop. The old man begins to chant, "Blessings upon this plaza. May its puddles reflect only joy, and may no one ever juggle fish again." The goat bleats. The crowd applauds. The old man pulls a scroll from his sleeve and reads a poem. It rhymes cauldron with spleen and ends with him blowing on a conch shell that produces the sound of a man sneezing into a tuba. Fringe historical tidbit: processions featuring animals were not uncommon in towns celebrating feast days, harvest festivals, or general "we survived another week" occasions. Goats, in particular, often represented abundance or mischief, depending on the region. Historians still argue whether the animals were chosen for symbolism or just because they were easy to decorate. A small child throws confetti. It's actually just sawdust, but the gesture is there. You step away quietly, now finally approaching the apothecary. You open the door and find yourself face to face with a woman wearing feathers, antlers, and exactly one shoe. "Would you like to hear a tale?" she asks, clearly mid performance. You say nothing. She begins anyway. Once, in a village, not unlike this one, except with more carrots, a young man walked into a shop and was immediately turned into a frog because he doubted the power of interpretive movement. You back out of the store. You will not risk becoming a cautionary tale. As you retreat, you bump into someone. Of course you do. It's the stilt man, the very same one from 2 days ago. Only now he's wearing stilts so tall you can't see his face. He speaks in rhyme. "Fair citizen of bread and fear, wouldst thou like to volunteer?" You shake your head so violently your hat slips over one eye. "Too late," he says. You are handed a ribbon. You do not know why. He gestures dramatically to the crowd. "My assistant will now summon the spirits of elevation and goat cheese." You consider lying down and pretending to faint, but you also suspect someone in the audience would just turn it into an interpretive nap sequence. You hold the ribbon. He jumps, lands near you, wobbles, spits out a dramatic "ha." You tie the ribbon to a nearby pole because why not? The crowd gasps. A dog barks. Someone plays a triangle. The stilt man bows. You bow. Someone puts a coin in your hand. You've been tipped again. That makes 2 tips. 1 burned eyebrow. 3 awkward hugs. A collection of new phobias. You're starting to feel like a regular. As you make your way home, you pass a musician asleep in a flower cart, still clutching his lute. The goat from earlier is now eating someone's laundry. A mime sits beside a well, sipping from an invisible cup. You reach your door. You exhale. You've survived the acrobats, the goat ritual, the reluctant celery, and a stilt wizard with a rhyming habit. And it's not even noon. You don't plan to go outside again. Not today. Not unless your roof catches fire or someone starts interpretive dance drumming inside your cupboard. But fate, as always, has plans. And your stomach, uncooperative traitor that it is, insists you need onions. Not a metaphorical need. This is the urgent, raw demand of someone who has attempted 3 meals today and failed due to unexpected performance art. So, you venture out, slowly, like a man sneaking through a battlefield armed only with awkward eye contact. The town is unusually quiet, suspiciously quiet. There are no tambourines, no mimes, no spontaneous juggling, just a calm breeze, a bird or two, and oh no, that sound. It's not music. It's not fire. It's talking. Fast, loud, and unmistakably theatrical talking. You peek around the corner and spot him. A man on a barrel, arm raised like he's mid opera, eyes wild with the fever of someone who once mistook a cabbage for a sign from the gods. He's a spoken word prophet, and as luck would have it, you're his next target. You, he booms, you walk as one who has tasted ash, seen the goat, and heard the accordions of despair. That's uncomfortably accurate. He leaps from the barrel. Let me tell you what your eyes have forgotten, he proclaims, arms wide, nearly knocking over a soup vendor. You were not born into this world to observe. You were born to participate, to taste the thunder of your ancestors. He's now very close. His breath smells like fennel and performance anxiety. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval towns had their fair share of self appointed prophets, philosophers, and preachers who traveled from square to square, delivering impromptu speeches, often blurring the lines between theology, poetry, and just yelling. Some were welcomed, others were banned. Historians still argue whether these prophets were early public intellectuals or just enthusiastic men with too much wine and no audience filter. He pulls out a scroll. You suspect it's blank. Let me read you the fate of the 3 onions. You do not wish to hear the fate of any onions, but he's already begun. One was chopped, one was fried, one became an idea. The crowd nods. A woman wipes away a tear. A dog howls in C minor. You try to sneak away, but the prophet spins dramatically and pins you with a stare. You doubt. You do. You resist. Accurate again. But friend, he whispers now, leaning in close, have you ever considered that perhaps you are the 4th onion? You excuse yourself politely and begin walking faster than socially acceptable. He follows, still narrating. You flee because the truth echoes too loudly inside you. You duck into the alley behind the butcher's stall. You hear him reciting behind you. He ran, not from fear, but from the unbearable clarity of legumes. You've had enough. You hide in a barrel. You stay very still. Eventually his voice fades. You peek out. Safe. You roll out of the barrel, dignity in shreds, and finally make it to the onion stall. Glorious, quiet onions. You grab 2. The vendor, mercifully, doesn't ask questions. She just raises an eyebrow at the hay in your hair. You pay. You turn to leave. You walk straight into a child. She looks up at you, silent, holding a piece of cheese. She hands it to you. You nod, confused. Then she yells, "Scene!" at the top of her lungs. From behind carts and crates, a dozen performers jump out, clapping and cheering. You've just completed a surprise street play. You didn't know you were in one. Fringe tidbit. In several medieval Italian cities, surprise theatrical scenes were staged in public spaces, pulling in unsuspecting passers-by as cast. Called intermezzi, these mini-plays were meant to delight, disturb, or sometimes teach moral lessons. Though yours mostly taught you to avoid barrels. The troupe lifts you onto a crate. Someone places a wreath of parsley on your head. A man narrates your journey as the one who walked with mimes and spoke with goats. You wave. You leave. Quickly, you're nearly home when you're stopped again, this time by a street vendor holding a large book. He flips it open and begins to read your aura, or that's what he says. You've seen things. he begins. Your energy? Unstable, burned on one side, smells faintly of goose. You do smell like goose. He continues flipping pages. Each page has a drawing, mostly spirals and stick figures, with dramatic eyebrows. He asks for a coin. You give him a half broken button. He accepts it like a precious gem and whispers, your aura has now been upgraded. You walk away quickly, not entirely sure what just happened. You reach your door. You open it. You sit on your bed. The cheese is still in your hand. The onions are bruised, but intact. You breathe. And then, outside your window, you hear Scene 2 begins now. You stare out the window. You shouldn't, but you do. The cheese from earlier sits forgotten in your lap, slowly softening into a metaphor. Your onions, once full of promise, now feel like burdens. And outside, forming a slow moving, rhythmically dangerous line, is a new threat. Children, lots of them, and each one holds a tambourine. Not toy tambourines, mind you. These are real, rattling, ominous instruments of chaos, some made of wood and tin, some clearly crafted from upcycled cookware. One child proudly shakes what might actually be a pot lid with beans glued inside. You recognize at least three faces from previous acts of public percussion. They see you. You back away from the window. Too late. Knock, knock. You open the door half an inch. A small hand thrusts forward a tiny scroll made of birch bark and thread. It reads, by order of the Guild of Small but Loud, you are cordially required to participate in the Festival of Tiny Rhythms. Failure to do so will result in an interpretive pout. You sigh, you tie your sandals, and you accept your fate. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval European towns, children were active participants in community life, not just as apprentices or messengers, but as entertainers in their own right. They performed in festivals, seasonal processions, and morality plays, often trained by their families or small performing troupes. Some were shockingly good, others were just shockingly loud. You're handed your assigned instrument, a soup ladle tied to a dried gourd. The leader, a child no taller than your hip, but wearing a cape made entirely of discarded fabric scraps and deep conviction, shouts, formation! The others snap into place. You are slotted into the third row. Your job is clear. Syncopated ladle taps every fourth beat. You're not sure what beat you're following. No one is. The parade begins, down the street, through the square, past a dog who howls in protest and a merchant who's learned to ignore these events by singing aggressively to himself. A few adults toss coins, a few toss bread, some toss apologies. You march, you shake, you ladle. You make it 2 blocks before things escalate. The front row begins a spin move. The second row attempts a leap. You trip on a cabbage. The gourd detaches from your ladle mid-swing and flies, like a shriveled comet, into a nearby fishmonger's bucket. Splash. A perfect landing. Cheers erupt. Someone shouts, he did the solo of soup regret. You are hoisted onto a crate. You are now the hero of the 5th beat. You did not ask for this. You receive a ribbon. It smells like vinegar and honesty. Fringe tidbit. There's evidence from 13th century Germantown records that children's street performances were occasionally used to raise money for school supplies, church repairs, or oddly, more tambourines. One account details a tiny drum army disrupting a tax collector so successfully that he forgave half a village's fees. You begin to suspect your village missed that memo. The children begin a finale. The leader climbs onto a barrel, raises both arms, and screams, freestyle. It's every man, woman, and toddler for themselves. Instruments clash, feet stomp. One child begins a monologue about cheese futures. Another throws glitter, which, upon inspection, is just dried beet flakes. You spin once, twice, drop your ladle, and land in a seated pose that could be mistaken for dramatic collapse. Applause. You are done. You step out of formation and bow. Someone hands you a juice cup. You sit on the curb and sip beet juice from a carved wooden duck. You think about your choices. You think about yesterday's mime. You wonder if this is what enlightenment feels like: sticky and confused, but oddly satisfying. Historians still debate whether such spontaneous child led performances were structured forms of education, chaotic play, or early manifestations of medieval flash mobs. One chronicler wrote simply, "The children were as bees, many, small, and impossible to ignore." You nod slowly. You feel that in your soul. As the parade disbands, the children scatter like flour in a breeze. The leader salutes you. "Your lateral work was acceptable," she says. High praise. You limp home. On the way, a familiar goat nods at you, the one with the crown. You bow back. Why not? At home, you set your ribbon next to yesterday's coin and the parsley crown from the puppet ritual. Your windowsill is now a shrine to unexpected achievements. You sit, you breathe. And just as you think, just think, you might finally nap, there's a knock. You don't answer. The knock comes again. You crack the door. Two children stand there. No tambourines, no gourds, just solemn expressions and matching smudges of face paint. "You've been nominated," one says. "For what?" you ask. They exchange a look. "For the cabbage prophecy." You shut the door. You go to bed. Let the cabbage find someone else. Sleep doesn't come easily. How could it, after the day you've had? Your dreams are filled with mimes offering tax advice, goats performing soliloquies, and that one child who declared beet juice the nectar of heroes. You wake up several times, half convinced someone's juggling in your rafters. By morning, you resign yourself to the fact that peace is no longer a setting on the dial of your life. It's been replaced with performance mode. You step outside. The street is unusually misty. Soft gray clouds swirling low like stage smoke. Suspicious. You step carefully, quietly. Maybe, just maybe, the performers sleep in on foggy days. You make it 2 houses before it begins. The whispering. You stop. You look around. You don't see anyone, but the whispering continues, echoing from alleyways and rooftops. Soft, urgent, dramatic. Like a wind chime crossed with gossip. You round a corner and there they are. 5 people dressed in identical gray cloaks, each standing perfectly still on a rooftop, arms folded, eyes scanning the street. The Whisper Guild. You'd heard rumors. Never loud ones. They're not traditional performers. No drums, no fire, no hats made of poultry. These are the minimalist artists of the street scene. Their art? Ambiguity. One of them points at you. Another nods solemnly. You do what anyone would do, panic internally while pretending to tie your sandal. Suddenly, they descend, gracefully, silently, like judgmental pigeons with better posture. One appears beside you. "You are the one from the fourth beat," he whispers, referring to your unwanted rise to fame in the children's percussion parade. You consider denying it, but your ribbon is still on your belt. You've been chosen for the subtle play. You blink. The what? He leans closer. "We perform emotions that no one can name." You try to back away, but another member emerges from a barrel and grabs your elbow gently, artistically. You are guided to a circle made of pebbles and melancholy. Mainstream historical fact. In the late medieval period, certain performance groups, especially in the Italian and French courts, practiced what they called mimetic abstraction, stylized wordless acting, intended to express inner turmoil, divine longing, or just fashionable sadness. Historians still argue whether it was profound or simply pretentious boredom. The Whisper Guild begins their play. One performer stares at a tree, another pretends to be a tree, a third weeps into a scarf while two others bow deeply toward a rock. No music, no speaking, just eye contact and existential dread. You are handed a scroll. You open it. It's blank. That's the point, one of them whispers. You nod slowly, unsure whether you're being enlightened or gently pranked. A small audience gathers. A few people cry. One person throws a single olive as tribute. Your role? Standing still. You are now the observer of what might be. You're not sure what that means. Fringe tidbit? In some remote monastic orders, young initiates were trained in emotional discipline through silent scenes, acts performed without language or motion, meant to test both the mind and the audience's patience. It was either spiritual training or a prank that got wildly out of hand. After 13 minutes of stillness, a rooster crows. The guild nods. The scene ends. You are handed a gray scarf and told, "You may now whisper at your leisure." You do not wish to whisper. You just want soup. You leave the circle, scarf in hand, and make your way to the tavern. You need warmth, bread, and a place where people talk at full volume. The tavern is loud today, thankfully. A lute player in the corner strums casually while someone tries to rhyme ale with existential betrayal. You slide onto a bench. The innkeeper knows you by now. He brings you stew, doesn't ask, doesn't perform. Bless him. You've nearly finished your bowl when the door opens. A hush falls over the room. A man enters, tall, mysterious, cloak like a thundercloud, beard trimmed into the shape of a question mark. He carries a single, large book. He walks to the center of the room. He opens the book slowly. He does not read. He stares at a page, then turns it, stares again, turns it again. People lean forward. You lean forward. It's working. He's turning pages like each one contains the secrets of the universe. He never speaks, just emotes, deeply, with eyebrows. You whisper to the man beside you, "What's happening?" "That's the page turner," he says. "He's been doing this for 5 years. Never repeated a single emotion." Mainstream debate alert. Historians still discuss whether silent, repetitive acts like this were performance, meditation, or just highly organized avoidance of chores. One 15th century text references a book gazer who attracted crowds by reading a closed volume for 7 hours. The page turner finally closes the book. The crowd erupts in applause. He bows once and leaves. You're not sure what you just watched, but you feel different, changed, emotionally paginated. You finish your stew and exit the tavern. The fog has lifted. The Whisper Guild has vanished. Only a single olive remains in the street. You walk home, scarf trailing behind you. You have survived the subtle play, earned a blank scroll, and witnessed the silent power of dramatic book browsing. And tomorrow? You're terrified of tomorrow. You wake to something very peculiar. Silence. Not suspicious Whisper Guild silence. Not a mime is standing behind your curtain silence. Just actual silence. You sit up, confused. No tambourines, no fire tricks, no goats bleating wisdom from rooftops. It's the kind of quiet that makes you think everyone agreed to leave town without telling you. You step outside cautiously, as if expecting a pratfall or spontaneous interpretive ambush. But no, the street is empty. The market is deserted. Even the mime's usual perch by the well is vacant, his invisible cup nowhere to be seen. You wander, slowly. Every footstep sounds like an oath. You pass the bakery, closed. The puppeteer's crate, missing. You reach the square, still nothing. And then you see it, a sign, hand painted, slightly askew, nailed to a turnip crate. Today only. Grand assembly of all performers. Location: the Quarry Hill stage spectators welcome. Regret optional. You blink. The Quarry Hill stage is miles outside town, a dusty, rarely used platform once intended for civic announcements and poorly attended goat auctions. You've never seen it used for anything other than wind. You consider your options. Option 1: stay here, bask in the beautiful, performer-less vacuum of town. Option 2: go, witness whatever nightmarish multi-genre chaos is about to unfold on a single elevated plank of wood surrounded by grass and regret. You sigh. You're going because if you don't, someone will come back and explain it to you dramatically, and that might be worse. Mainstream historical fact: medieval communities often held festivals or seasonal assemblies where artists, musicians, and entertainers gathered for competitions or grand collaborative performances. These gatherings were part celebration, part social chaos, and part theatrical arms race. Towns used them to display culture, settle grudges, or, in some cases, exhaust local performers so they'd be quieter afterward. You pack a snack, just in case. You take the winding path to Quarry Hill, half hoping you're too late and they've all packed up and gone home. You arrive. They have not. Hundreds of people swarm the hill like ants in a dress rehearsal for the apocalypse. Jugglers toss pineapples. A trio of goats wear matching hats. There's someone fencing a fish, possibly metaphorically. You spot at least four mimes miming to each other, which seems cosmically dangerous. A man in an enormous velvet hat yells, "The Bard Off begins in 10 minutes," as if that's a normal sentence to hear. You find a rock and sit. This is going to be long. Fringe tidbit: some festivals in 14th century Europe held bard tournaments, where poets and storytellers faced off in verse battles. These contests could span hours and often ended with mock duels, audience voting, or one bard bursting into tears over an aggressive limerick. The first act is a musical, sort of. A woman in armor sings about lost love and cabbages, while dancers dressed as vegetables whirl around her in synchrony. You appreciate the commitment. You do not understand the plot. The second act: three clowns, one goose, and a spinning wheel of fate. You assume it's comedic. The goose disagrees. The third: oh no, it's the flute man. He stands alone, backlit by the setting sun, eyes closed, flute raised like a weapon. The first note pierces the air like a mosquito's confession. The second note startles a squirrel into fainting. You tense. But then, another flutist appears, the original flutist's rival. You did not know he had a rival. They begin a duet duel, a musical standoff filled with increasingly complex flourishes and increasingly intense eyebrow action. The crowd is hypnotized. One child throws their shoe in admiration, another offers a beat. You, against your better judgment, clap. Historians still argue whether these duels were about skill, courtship, or unresolved loot-related trauma. Either way, you're here now, and the flute. War rages on. Next up, a stilt chorus. A dozen performers in towering stilts begin a synchronized song about the tragedy of forgotten spoons. It is haunting and unexpectedly moving. You cry, just a little. Then comes a puppet opera. Yes, puppet opera. Mordo, the puppet, is back, now joined by a full cast: the Button Queen, Sir Elbow, and a suspiciously charismatic snail named Gerald. The puppets sing, the puppeteer sings, the goat from earlier attempts harmony. It's oddly transcendent. By the time the finale begins, The sky has darkened. Lanterns float in the air. Children pass out beet cakes. A troupe of interpretive jugglers forms a human pyramid shaped like a sad question mark. The Grand Assembly ends with a speech delivered by the mayor? No, by the town bell ringer, who stands on the stage in a robe made of lost laundry and declares, "Let this gathering be a reminder. Art is everywhere, even under your bed, especially under your bed." You walk home in silence. Everyone's too tired to perform. It's beautiful. You reach your home, your bed, your peace. And just as you close your eyes, you whisper softly, even under your bed, you check, just in case. You sleep deeply, uninterrupted, no drum solos, no whispered prophecies, no clowns launching tubers at your window, just blissful, uninterrupted, dreamless sleep. You wake up 12 hours later, unsure of the day, your name, or whether you're technically still part of the Whisper Guild. Outside, quiet, real quiet, not the kind that's plotting something, just the peaceful hum of a town that has collectively exhausted itself through 6 straight days of artistic mayhem. You step out and feel something strange: normalcy, birdsong, a cart rolling slowly over cobblestones, a woman humming while sweeping. No stilts, no flaming barrels, no accordion solos in B sharp, maybe. You walk down the street cautiously, like a deer testing ice. No one stops you. No one flings produce in iambic pentameter. No one mimes your internal anguish. Could it be? Have they stopped? You reach the town square. A few performers linger here and there, but they're not performing, just sitting, chatting, stretching sore muscles and wrapping blisters. The man with the broom lute is tuning silently. Mordo, the puppet, is asleep in a crate, snoring softly through a hinge. Even the goat is resting, crown askew, chewing contemplatively on a map. You spot the tambourine children, drawing chalk patterns on the street, peacefully. No beats, just doodles of heroic ladles and suspiciously lifelike onions. Mainstream historical fact: after major festivals or community assemblies, it was common for towns to observe a day or more of rest, sometimes enforced by local authorities who needed to sweep the square, collect lost shoes, and gently escort bards out of fountains. These post celebration days were cherished for washing, napping, and evaluating which performances might technically count as crimes. You sit on the fountain's edge. Someone offers you bread. You accept. It's quiet enough that you can hear your own thoughts again. A strange, rusty sensation. You think about everything you've survived: the mime duels, the goat rituals, the screaming celery, the interpretive solos about legumes. You remember being knighted by a child, wielding a soup ladle. You remember the tear you shed during the spoon tragedy ballad. You chew, and then you hear it, faint, far off, but unmistakable. A tune, soft, curious. A single melody line plucked on what sounds like a dulcimer, or maybe a modified cheese grater. You stand, the sound draws you toward the edge of town. You pass the bakery, where the baker raises a floury hand and mouths, "Be careful." You nod, because of course you nod. At the outskirts, in a clearing near the tree line, sits a lone man playing an instrument you've never seen. It has strings, bells, something that resembles spoons, and possibly hooves. He looks up, smiles. "Would you like to hear the song of the wandering cart?" You blink. He begins. It's soft, gentle, melancholy, almost beautiful. You sit. For the first time, the music doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't yank you into a play or a goat procession or a reluctant aerial performance involving onions and heartbreak. It just exists. You close your eyes, and for a moment it all makes sense. Fringe tidbit: traveling musicians often acted as early news carriers, using song to share local gossip, heroic tales, and royal decrees, because nothing sticks in the mind quite like a catchy ballad about taxes. The most talented of these minstrels developed entire repertoires about everyday objects: boots, rain, and yes, even carts. When the song ends, the musician nods, packs up his instrument, or at least tries to fold it. One hoof keeps sticking out, and wanders off down the path. No speech, no moral, no interpretive bow. Just a man with a melody. Continuing on. You walk back into town. A puppet waves from a window. You wave back. Someone has drawn a chalk outline of you on the cobbles, labeled the fourth onion. You don't argue. You step into the apothecary for the first time in days. No performance, just jars and quiet. You buy something herbal and calming, and entirely unpoetic. The shopkeeper smiles. You made it through the week, huh? You nod. We lost 3 barmaids and a turnip cart, she adds, but I think it was worth it. You're not sure what the turnip cart did to deserve its fate, but you agree anyway. You return home. The sun sets. Lanterns flicker on, but no one choreographs it. The town exhales. Historians still debate whether medieval communities truly valued these quiet days or simply endured them between bursts of chaotic performance. One chronicler wrote, "On the 8th day, the fool did not jest, and the people wept with relief." You fall into bed, no dreams of goats, just stillness. And somewhere, just faintly, the echo of a song about a cart that never stopped moving. You wake to birds, not performers dressed as birds, not children squawking the entire history of fowl in interpretive mime, just actual birds. The sun peeks through your window. You stretch. Nothing hurts. There's no cabbage-based scroll nailed to your door. It's a good start. You pour water into a clay mug and sip it slowly, letting your body adjust to the strangeness of not being yanked into a dance-off by someone dressed as a mythological beat. You open your door and immediately freeze, because standing outside is a man in a robe of many colors, literally many. No 2 pieces of fabric match. One sleeve appears to be a curtain, the other may be part of a sail. He's smiling. Too much. "Good morning," he says. You nod cautiously. "I am the collector," he says. You consider shutting the door. "I collect performances, unfinished ones." You did not know that was a thing. "Your scene at the puppet opera," he continues, "technically incomplete. You never accepted Gerald the Snail's invitation to the Moss Ball." You blink. "I was a spectator," you say. He holds up a list. It's long. On it, your name, followed by entries like Street Parade Beat 4, Emotional Unresolved Ending, Goat Crown Ritual, Insufficient Kneeling, Stilt Sonnet, Bow Missed Cue. You realize with horror that your entire past week has been cataloged. Mainstream historical fact: some Renaissance cities employed official festival chroniclers, scribes who documented public performances, rituals, even spontaneous acts of artistic expression. These records helped preserve local lore and occasionally got citizens fined for lack of enthusiasm during royal puppet reenactments. Historians still argue whether these were genuine civic documents or highly creative gossip sheets. Today, the collector says, we resolve everything. You try to protest. You mutter something about a foot cramp, a goat allergy, but it's too late. He blows a horn made of what may be a hollowed out turnip. From behind corners, rooftops, and suspiciously quiet crates, the town's performers emerge. All of them: the Whisper Guild, the Tambourine Children, the Broom Lute Bard, Mordo the Puppet, now wearing a tiny crown and cape. Even the goat looks determined. You are gently ushered into the center of the square. Someone places a flower crown on your head. Someone else hands you a script. You glance at it. It says in large handwriting, "The final scene, the redemption of the reluctant observer." Oh no, a stool is placed under you. A small orchestra, mostly spoons and dulcimers, begins to tune. You are surrounded. The collector announces, "We shall now complete the performances you have evaded. Let the threads be tied. Let the metaphors be mixed. Let the goat speak his truth." And so it begins. Act 1, a musical reenactment of your first encounter with the Stilt Man, now with full chorus and a flashback subplot involving dramatic wind. Act 2, the emotional conclusion of the street mime's invisible romance with the town crier. You play the letter, just a literal folded parchment. You lie motionless for 3 minutes. The crowd weeps. Fringe tidbit: there are reports from 16th century France of entire plays being staged around objects. A spoon's journey, a boot's existential dilemma, even the inner monologue of a particularly gassy cheese. The line between prop and protagonist was porous. Act 3, you are seated beside Gerald the Snail, still a puppet, still unsettlingly expressive. Together, you sip moss tea, actually spinach broth. As the other puppets sing a goodbye song called "To Shell and Back," you bow, not because you want to, because the goat is watching. And finally, Act 4, the goat ascends a crate. The crowd quiets. He bleats once, loud, clear. Then the broom lute man strums a solemn tune, and the townspeople begin to chant, "He came as one, unwilling and mild, but left as the heart of the festival's child." You are lifted, literally, onto a makeshift throne made from old laundry baskets and radish garlands. The collector places a medallion around your neck. It says, "Participant." That's it. Not winner, not hero, just participant. And somehow that feels right. You sit dazed. Bread is passed around. Children toss flower petals. A puppet high-fives you. Someone declares a Newtown rule: 1 day of quiet per every 6 days of interpretive chaos. Everyone cheers. You return home slowly, flower petals still clinging to your tunic, your script tucked in your pocket, the medallion warm against your chest. You sit. And this time, when you look at your little shrine of objects, your ribbon, your parsley crown, your beet juice stained scarf, you don't sigh. You smile. You made it. You survived the performances. You lived the plotline you never asked for. And maybe, just maybe, you liked it. The next morning the town is quiet again, but this time it's a different kind of quiet. Not the "something is lurking behind the cabbage cart" quiet. No, this is aftermath quiet. The silence of people who have collectively overexpressed themselves and now need herbal tea and a nap. You stretch and crack your joints like a weary actor after closing night. Outside, the air smells like rain and bread. Somewhere, someone is baking. No stilts, no scrolls. Just real, honest to goodness, mundane existence. You take a slow stroll to the market. You see familiar faces. Less dramatic today, more human. The Whisper Guild is selling lavender satchels and whispering very reasonable prices. Mordo, the puppet, has a sign that reads "Off Duty. No prophecies until Monday." The goat is lounging beside a cart of turnips, chewing with royal detachment. You finally get to shop. You buy onions, you buy garlic. You even get a fresh wheel of cheese without being emotionally manipulated by a child. As you pay, the vendor nods to you. Good show last night, she says. You chuckle awkwardly. I didn't do much. That's what made it brilliant, she replies. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval theater, the everyman character was a staple, an ordinary figure thrust into chaos, tasked with surviving, adapting, and, hopefully, reflecting the audience's own confusion and courage. Scholars still debate whether these roles were meant to educate or simply amuse, but the most successful ones, they didn't act, they just reacted. You are now officially an everyman. Congratulations. You take your goods and stroll toward the well. You pass the fountain. It's been cleaned. Someone has carved into the base. All the world's a stage. Some of us just wanted soup. You couldn't have said it better. You find a shady spot near the town wall and sit. Just you, your garlic, and a long overdue sense of peace. Until you hear a voice, soft, slightly nasal. Excuse me, are you the one who played the observer of what might be? You blink. Standing before you is a young man, clutching a bundle of papers. Ink smudges on his fingers, bright eyes, an expression that says, I'm about to ask you for something complicated. Yes, you say unsure. He nods, excited. I'm writing a play about last week. I'm calling it The Goat, the Scroll, and the Man Who Didn't Know What Was Happening. You blink again. Catchy. I'd like you to be in it. You start to say no, firmly, definitively. But he continues. You won't have to speak. Just stand there. Maybe hold a ladle. You pause. A familiar weight returns to your hand. The memory of rhythm. The haunting beat of tiny feet and one very assertive beat flake. You sigh and say, fine, but only if I get soup this time. He grins. You'll get soup and a standing ovation. Fringe tidbit. In 15th century England, there was a town that paid a man, officially titled the Enthusiast, whose job was simply to stand still and look confused during local performances. Audiences adored him. He never spoke a line. His blank stare became legendary. You may be his spiritual descendant. Later that day, you rehearse under a fig tree. Your role? Confused participant. But one, you nail it. The playwright claps. A woman walks by, throws you a fig, and says, I remember that scene. It wasn't a scene. It was your life. You eat the fig anyway. That evening, the sun sets over rooftops bathed in orange. The town begins to stir again, just slightly. A few people start humming. A child spins once, gently. Someone lays down a tambourine but doesn't shake it. It's not a performance. It's a rhythm. Not forced, not chaotic, just part of the town's new heartbeat. You sit on your stoop. The stars come out. And for once, no one monologues about them. Historians still argue whether people in the past enjoyed all this public spectacle, or whether, like you, they simply got used to it. Maybe both. Maybe that's the point. You lean back, eyes closed. You are the everyman. You have been juggled over, sung at, mildly worshipped by a goat, and repeatedly handed objects you never asked for. And you're still here, still standing, still holding the ladle. The next day begins with the sound of a lute, not aggressive, not on fire, just a gentle, out-of-tune plucking that somehow sounds like someone trying to remember how joy works. You poke your head outside. There's a man sitting on your roof, casual, cross-legged, wearing a hat shaped like a loaf of bread. He strums a chord. Good morning, he says. Your house has great acoustics. You stare. He adds, I'm testing how rooftops affect musical intention. You close the door. You make tea. Then, sighing, you open the door again and say, would you like some? He climbs down with the grace of someone who's fallen off multiple things and learned nothing. You sit on your stoop together. He plays. You sip, you don't talk. You just exist. And then you realize something. The music, however questionable, isn't annoying anymore. It's familiar, like a creaky chair or the smell of your neighbor's soap. And that's how it starts. The quiet phase. Post chaos. The festival is over. The scrolls have been filed. The goat has been fed a hero's ration of beets and hay. People are back to their normal routines. Except that now, those routines include just a touch of flair. The baker sings while kneading. The blacksmith hums in iambic pentameter. Even the town crier has started adding dramatic pauses to the weather report. Mainstream historical fact. In the wake of festivals or major public celebrations, medieval towns often experienced a ripple effect. What began as spectacle evolved into habit, people integrating bits of performance into daily life. Historians still debate whether this cultural seepage improved morale or simply delayed productivity by about 20%. You walk through town and notice subtle shifts. The broom loot man has started a school of household harmony, teaching local kids to make music using spoons, brooms, and bread crusts. You pass a child earnestly soloing with a ladle, while two others provide backup percussion using a sack of lentils. The Whisper Guild, temporarily retired from cryptic art, now hosts quiet storytime sessions, still entirely in mime, but with audience approved subtitles held up by passing goats. The mime himself, he's taken up pottery. And oddly, it suits him. You buy a mug, shaped like a scream, and a saucer shaped like its emotional recovery. At the fountain, the puppets hold therapy sessions. Gerald the snail is particularly effective. You overhear someone say, I never knew I needed closure with my father until a puppet mollusk gave me a monologue. It tracks. Fringe tidbit. In some parts of 15th century Italy and Bohemia, puppetry was used not just for entertainment, but for social commentary, therapy, and even legal arbitration. There are recorded disputes settled with puppet reenactments. One involved three goats, a carrot, and a very angry shoe merchant. You sit on a bench and soak it in. Life isn't back to normal, but it's also not normal. It's just enhanced. A little weird, a little theatrical, a lot more colorful. Someone drops a flyer in your lap. You glance at it. Community loot circle, all skill levels. Welcome. Come pluck your truth. You're about to crumple it reflexively when you pause. You remember the rooftop man's music, the awkward comfort of it, the way it reminded you that not everything has to be polished, that sometimes sincerity is louder than talent. You keep the flyer. You might go later, maybe. You stop by the tavern. The innkeeper nods. No plays today, he says. You exhale in relief. But, he adds, there is a reading. You wince of a cookbook, he clarifies. You pause, then smile. Inside, a woman is dramatically reading recipes aloud, each one delivered like a Shakespearean soliloquy. 3 cloves of garlic, pressed, not crushed, for they must yield willingly. The crowd is riveted. You sit, you order soup. You eat it without interpretive dance. This is growth. Historians still argue whether art seeped into everything because people wanted it, or because they were bored and had limited furniture. But maybe there's truth in both. Maybe a little performance helps the potatoes taste better. You finish your soup. You walk home. Outside your door is a small box. You open it. Inside, a tiny puppet, hand-stitched, with a familiar expression of quiet confusion and slightly panicked resignation. It looks just like you. A note reads, for the participant, you made it memorable. With love, the goat, dictated, not written. You hold the puppet. You blink. You may or may not be crying. You place it gently on your shelf, beside the ribbon, the scarf, the parsley crown, and the medallion. Your life now has a display case labeled Unexpected Achievements, Emotional and Otherwise, and it feels complete for now. You start your morning with a quiet cup of tea. No performances, no surprise mimes, no existential vegetables reciting sonnets about soil erosion. Just tea. You sip slowly and look around your humble dwelling. Your medallion gleams faintly in the corner. Gerald, the snail, stares at you from the shelf with eternal puppet wisdom. Your scarf hangs where you last left it, still beat stained, still glorious. Today, you tell yourself, will be ordinary. You finish your tea. You step outside, and immediately you trip over a dancing bear. Yes, a bear. Dancing, wearing bells, and a tiny hat. The bear is accompanied by a man in patchwork trousers who plays a tune on a cracked fiddle, as though his entire livelihood depends on convincing people that this bear can, indeed, do the cha cha. Sorry, the man says brightly, helping you up. Didn't see you there. Boris gets very excited around porches. You nod, cautiously. The bear nods too, then resumes dancing. To be fair, Boris has rhythm. You sit on the stoop again, clutching your tea, carefully. So, you ask the man, is this part of something larger? Oh no, he says, this is it. He gestures proudly. Just me and Boris, doing the circuit. Bread, applause, and the occasional duck attack. Mainstream historical fact. Dancing bears were a popular form of street entertainment across Europe from the Middle Ages through the 19th century. Bear trainers, known as ursari in Eastern Europe, would tour villages, showcasing their animals' ability to dance, which was usually trained through a mix of rhythm exposure and, unfortunately, less ethical methods. Historians still argue whether crowds were genuinely entertained or just morbidly fascinated. Boris does a spin. The crowd claps. Yes, a crowd has formed. In 2 minutes. Someone offers the bear a turnip. He accepts it with dignity. The fiddler passes a hat. Coins jingle in. A child whispers, that bear is better at dancing than I am. You quietly agree, and just when you think it can't escalate, because surely, a dancing bear is enough, someone arrives with a monkey on a leash, wearing a vest. The monkey carries a tambourine. Of course it does. The monkey and Boris eye each other. You've seen this look before. It's about to become a duet showdown. Sure enough, the monkey begins to rattle in rhythm. Boris replies with a percussive shuffle. The monkey spins. Boris counters with a bow and a foot tap that could rival any court dancer. You are now witnessing an interspecies percussion battle. It is glorious. You want to cry. Fringe tidbit. In some traveling performer circles, animal acts were competitive. Trainers would try to one up each other in town squares to earn more coin. There's even one historical account of a pig who recited the alphabet with grunts and snorts, which later turned out to be a very clever baker, making vowel noises behind a curtain. The monkey climbs a crate. Boris rears up. The music builds. The crowd chants, bear, monkey, bear, monkey. And then, an unexpected third challenger enters the ring. A goose, not just any goose, the goose, wearing its usual attitude, and a new sash that reads, Justice. You gasp. This is no ordinary moment. This is a tri-species rhythmic reckoning. The goose steps forward, stares down the monkey, honks at Boris, then honks again, this time in 6-mate time. You don't know what's happening anymore, but you can't look away. The fiddler plays faster. The monkey tambourines, the bear shuffles, the goose honks, flaps, and somehow moonwalks. The crowd erupts. A man in the back yells, this is the best day of my life. Coins fly. Bread is thrown. One woman gives the goose a single grape and whispers, Thank you. Eventually, the act ends. No winner, no loser, just mutual admiration and sweaty applause. You're left sitting on your stoop again, tea long gone, brain possibly broken. I don't know what just happened, you say aloud. From behind you, your neighbor, an elderly woman who once performed a 23-minute monologue about parsley, leans over and says, "That was art, dear." Mainstream historical fact. Many traveling performers treated animals not just as gimmicks, but as partners. There are accounts of bears with names and fan followings, monkeys who played specific characters in puppet dramas, and geese who were apparently just really good at timing. Scholars debate whether audiences saw them as sentient participants or highly trained props. You wave goodbye to the performers as they leave. The monkey tips his hat. The goose stares long and hard into your soul before waddling off like nothing happened. You sit in silence until you hear a gentle knock. It's a child. You flinch slightly. She holds out a scroll. You groan internally, but then she says, "It's just a drawing." You take it. It's a stick figure of you, the bear, the monkey, and the goose. You smile. You tape it to your wall. You may not understand what your life has become, but you're pretty sure it beats normal. The next day dawns with a sky heavy and gray, the kind that seems to promise rain but never quite delivers, much like the juggling acts that keep your nerves frayed and your patience thinner than the village baker's last loaf. You step outside, bracing yourself for whatever spectacle the streets have conjured up for the morning, knowing full well that the day will be a wild ride, or at least an awkward shuffle through a parade of eccentricity. Today it's the opera aspirants, not full-fledged performers yet, but hopefuls whose ambitions outweigh their vocal control by miles. They gather in the market square, forming a ragtag chorus that could best be described as haunted laundry. Their voices weave through the air like a swarm of drunken bees, hitting notes so painfully off key, you wonder if they're auditioning for the role of human foghorn. A woman belts out a particularly passionate aria about lost turnips, while her partner hits a high note that makes a nearby dog bolt for shelter. You cover your ears, but not before catching the earnest glint in their eyes, pure unfiltered conviction, and a little desperation. Mainstream historical fact. Opera as an art form was just emerging during the late Renaissance, but early public musical performances often featured amateur singers who drew crowds by sheer enthusiasm, if not technical skill. These gatherings were community affairs, where everyone's voice mattered, even if it occasionally caused mild ear trauma. Historians still debate whether these mass sing-alongs were musical milestones or public noise complaints. You decide to sit on the fountain's edge and watch the chaos unfold. The aspiring opera troupe paces back and forth, practicing grand gestures and dramatic poses, occasionally pausing to exchange pointed glances that say, "Is my face screaming or just my voice?" One man steps forward to deliver a solo. He throws his arms wide, takes a deep breath, and lets out a note so piercing it shatters a nearby glass. He beams. The crowd claps politely, though a few clutch their ears. You nod in reluctant applause, secretly grateful it's not you. Fringe tidbit: some medieval towns had voice trainers, traveling musicians who offered lessons in belting and breath control in exchange for ale or chickens. Their methods were unorthodox and often involved yelling at passing goats to test vocal power. There's even a story of one trainer who lost his voice permanently, much to everyone's relief. As the opera aspirants regroup, a new performer takes the stage, a man with a lute, a wide-brimmed hat, and a smile that suggests he's about to steal the show, or at least a few coins. He strums gently, weaving a melody that soothes the chaos like a balm on a blistered ear. The crowd quiets, entranced by the simplicity and sincerity of the tune. Even the opera hopefuls pause, nodding along, catching their breath. You feel a rare sense of calm wash over the square. The man finishes his song with a flourish and bows deeply. Someone tosses a coin into his hat. The crowd cheers. You realize that despite the chaos, the noise, and the occasional flying fruit, there is beauty in this daily madness, a shared pulse that keeps the town alive and breathing. You rise to leave, feeling strangely connected to this odd community of performers and survivors. The opera aspirants start warming up again, their voices rising once more into the morning air. You smile softly and walk home, knowing tomorrow will bring new acts, new stories, and perhaps another song to carry you through the day. You've become accustomed to the rhythm of the streets, the unexpected moments that jolt you from routine into an ongoing saga of the surreal. But nothing prepares you for the next act. A troupe arrives that's unlike any before. The puppeteers bring forth creatures not of wood or cloth, but of shadow and light. Lanterns flicker, casting eerie shapes against the stone walls. Figures dance in the dark, their movements fluid and haunting, like smoke forming and dissolving in a forgotten dream. You stop captivated. The shadow players begin their performance without words, but with stories you can almost hear. The flickering silhouettes tell tales of loss, hope, and laughter, all in shapes and gestures. A child beside you gasps, clutching a small glowing lantern, eyes wide. Historical fact: shadow puppetry is an ancient art with roots stretching back to Asia and the Mediterranean. By the medieval era, traveling shadow performers enchanted audiences with stories told through light and silhouette, evoking wonder without the need for words. Historians still debate whether these performances were mystical rituals or simple entertainment. Perhaps both. You find yourself drawn into the tale, the flickering images sparking memories you hadn't realized you had. You watch a shadow goat leap through forests of light. A shadow mime dances in joyous silence. A shadow lute strums a tune only the heart can hear. Fringe tidbit: some medieval manuscripts describe shadow plays used in secret religious gatherings, where the flickering figures represented saints or sinners, blurring the line between theater and spiritual vision. Others suggest shadow shows were popular carnival amusements, laced with satire. The performance slows, a final image emerges, a figure reaching out, offering an invisible hand. It's you somehow, the reluctant participant who became a symbol of the town's living story. The crowd breathes as one. Then a gentle rain begins, not enough to drench, but enough to cleanse. You smile softly. The lanterns glow brighter, casting warm halos on the wet stones. You realize that after all the chaos, the noise, the accidental stardom, the town's true heartbeat is not in the performances themselves, but in the stories shared, the connections made, and the silent moments between. You walk home, the cool air fresh on your skin, the scent of wet earth and candle wax in your nose. Your steps are light, your mind quiet, and for the first time in days, you feel truly at peace. You awaken feeling different. Not the usual fog of confusion or the residual echo of fire eaters and flutes. No, this morning feels quieter. The morning light spills gently across your room, casting soft shadows that seem almost deliberate, as if the day itself invites calm. You rise and open your door. The street is still, peaceful. The chaotic symphony of performers has settled into a gentle hum, like a lullaby sung by a town that's finally come home. You step outside. Familiar faces nod in greeting, not as actors, but as neighbors. You walk slowly through the square, the cobblestones warm beneath your feet. The market stalls are bustling with traders, not entertainers. A child laughs, chasing a puppy instead of a tambourine. The mime practices quietly in a corner, no longer stalking you, but simply perfecting his craft. You pause by the well. A man plucks a simple tune on a wooden flute, soft, humble, just enough to fill the air without overwhelming it. You breathe in, you realize you've survived it all. The mimes, the jugglers, the goat processions, the unexpected solos, the shadow plays, the operatic chaos. You've endured the noise, the crowds, the accidental stardom. And through it all, you found moments of joy, connection, and wonder. Historians still argue whether street performers were revered or reviled, whether they were social glue or mere distractions. But you know the truth. They were the heartbeat of this place, the pulse that kept the streets alive when routine threatened to dull the edges of life. As the sun sets, you find yourself on your stoop, watching lanterns ignite across the rooftops. A soft breeze carries the distant melody of a lute, the faint beat of a drum. You close your eyes, feeling the gentle sway of the town's rhythm, and you smile, because in the end, surviving this world wasn't about escaping the performers. It was about learning to dance with them, with all their fire, their noise, their chaos, and their unexpected beauty. You lean back, the night wrapping around you like a comforting cloak. The world is noisy, messy, unpredictable, but tonight it is yours. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.